is to get to the truth and get justice. But the language, please think about who hears our words.
Wives, sisters, mothers, cousins, if they knew and said nothing, these individuals are just as guilty as the rapists themselves.
I feel disgusted by what the Honourable Gentleman has just said.
Experts estimate that millions of rapes may have occurred in Britain's gang scandal. Yet, how many perpetrators have faced justice? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
The British people want answers, so I'm going to ask questions of the Labour Party and several of them.
In this explosive Parliament debate, Rupert Lowe demands answers. From deportation numbers to benefit claims of convicted rapists, no stone is left unturned. But can the truth be handled without breaking down? As the parliamentary debate began, an air of anticipation filled the chamber. Rupert Lowe, known for his no-nonsense approach, took center stage with a list of uncomfortable questions that would soon leave his fellow politicians squirming in their seats.
Will the government commit to urgently deporting all guilty foreign nationals involved, including family members who were aware of the crime?
The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Lowe launched into his interrogation, determined to expose the government's failure to protect vulnerable girls and bring perpetrators of the rape gang scandal to justice. Lowe's first salvo targeted the murky waters of deportation. He demanded to know how many foreign nationals found guilty of these heinous crimes had been released, but not deported. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. How many of these individuals were still walking free on British streets, posing an ongoing risk to vulnerable girls?
Wives, sisters, mothers, cousins, if they knew and said nothing, these individuals are just as guilty as the rapists themselves.
And of those released, how many had reoffended? The silence that followed was deafening. But Lowe was just getting started. He turned his attention to the financial burden these criminals were placing on taxpayers. How many of these foreign rapists are in receipt of any form of state benefit, he asked, his voice cutting through the uncomfortable shuffling of papers. The question struck at the heart of a system that seemed to prioritize the rights of criminals over the safety of citizens. As if sensing the growing unease in the room, Lowe pressed on, delving into even more sensitive territory. He raised the alarming possibility that deportations were being blocked due to the rapists' right to family life claims. The very notion that such protections could be extended to individuals guilty of such serious crimes seemed to defy logic. How many deportations, Lowe demanded to know, had been obstructed on these grounds? The relentless questioning continued, each inquiry peeling back another layer of institutional neglect and cover-ups. Lowe called for transparency on the immigration status and previous convictions of those involved in the rape gang scandal. He demanded a breakdown of the immigration status of the perpetrators, painting a picture of a system that had failed at every level to protect its most vulnerable citizens. As Lowe's interrogation intensified, the impact on his fellow MPs became increasingly evident. Sarah Champion, in particular, seemed to be struggling to maintain her composure.
I feel disgusted by what the Honourable Gentleman has just said.
The weight of the truths being laid bare before them was palpable, and Champion's reaction served as a powerful symbol of the emotional toll these revelations were taking. As Rupert Lowe's relentless questioning continued, the atmosphere in the parliamentary chamber grew increasingly tense. Sarah Champion, a seasoned advocate for child protection, found herself at the epicenter of an emotional storm. Known for her extensive work on child exploitation and the grooming gang scandal, Champion had weathered many political storms, but this time, something was different.
Can you imagine if you're a victim or survivor listening to that?
Lowe's words cut through the usual political posturing, laying bare the harsh realities of a system that had failed countless vulnerable young girls. As he spoke, the weight of years of institutional failure seemed to descend upon the chamber. Champion, who had dedicated her career to fighting for these victims, visibly struggled to maintain her composure. The turning point came when Lowe's questioning touched upon the most sensitive aspects of the scandal. He didn't just ask about numbers or policies, he demanded accountability for the human cost of political inaction. Champion, who had spent years listening to the harrowing stories of survivors, found herself overwhelmed by the stark truths being laid out before Parliament. It wasn't just the content of Lowe's questions that affected Champion. Her emotional reaction was sparked by the realization that his forceful language could be distressing for victims and survivors who might be listening to the proceedings. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Champion spoke up.
Is to get to the truth and get justice. But the language, please think about who hears our words.
Stating that Lowe's approach was too harsh and emphasizing the need for sensitivity when discussing such traumatic issues. But the floodgates had already opened. As Lowe continued to press for urgent deportations and investigations into officials who had failed to act, Champion's professional facade crumbled. Tears flowed freely, shocking even the most hardened parliamentarians. In that moment, the debate transcended political lines, becoming a powerful symbol of the human toll exacted by the grooming gang scandal. Champion's breakdown served as a stark reminder that behind the statistics and policy debates were real people, victims, survivors, and those fighting tirelessly for justice. Her tears spoke volumes about the emotional burden carried by those who confront these dark realities day after day. The aftermath of Champion's emotional display sent shockwaves through Parliament and beyond. Colleagues from across the political spectrum rallied around her, expressing support and acknowledging the gravity of the issues raised. Her vulnerability in that moment did more to highlight the urgency of addressing the scandal than any carefully crafted speech could have done. The explosive exchange between Rupert Lowe and Sarah Champion has sent shockwaves through the nation, forcing Britons to confront the stark reality of their country's failure to protect its most vulnerable children. This parliamentary debate has become a watershed moment in the ongoing fight for justice and accountability in the rape gang scandal. The public's reaction has been nothing short of visceral, with many expressing outrage over the handling of these cases and demanding immediate action from those in power. But will this emotionally charged confrontation truly lead to meaningful change? Or will it become yet another footnote in a long history of missed opportunities? The intense public scrutiny now focused on this issue suggests that the status quo may no longer be tenable. Yet, skeptics rightly point out that previous outcries have failed to produce substantial reforms. As the dust settles on this parliamentary showdown, the question remains: will the government finally take concrete steps to address the systemic failures that allowed these atrocities to occur? Or will the victims' voices once again fade into the background of political inertia?